Welcome to Demolition Success Secrets, the podcast that's changing the game for demolition businesses everywhere. Ever wondered how a wrecking ball wielding industry can leverage digital marketing to dominate their market? Well, we've got the blueprints, strategies, expert guests, and more to show you how. Stay tuned, because we're about to blast through the barriers of your business.
Alrighty, cool. Welcome everyone. We have a really smart, cool, insightful guest today. We have Dan Hoffman. Dan, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. I love to be on my soapbox on certain issues.
We're going to give you a massive soapbox today, and I think you're going to be able to tell a lot of people in your world maybe some things they already know, maybe some new things. So Dan, how did you get to where you are? Tell us kind of your story.
How long do you have?
Yeah, we have 45 minutes set aside, but we might have a few more extra.
I came out of the service and went to work for a Safeway scaffolding company in Philadelphia. And one of my customers was a company called Cleveland Wrecking, and a lot of the other demolition companies in Philadelphia, where we take down buildings by hand, 25-story or so, and I put up the scaffolding. There was a couple of deaths of the management at Cleveland Wrecking, and they started moving people around. And the new guy came in from California and had heard about me from his dad, and wanted to hire me away from Safeway. And I said, you gotta go talk to my boss. And he made a deal with my boss to take me, and they would give him all the work if I would come over. So that's how I wound up with Cleveland Wrecking. And one of the areas that I kind of specialized in was on that scaffolding. I'd been building some really quirky stuff, and General Motors was one of my customers, and I had done some really squirrely stuff for them. And they called me and they said, we're going to have a big job coming up, and you work for those demo companies up there in Philadelphia. This is a Wilmington, Delaware plant, and we want to have some bids from them. So who would you recommend? And I gave them about 3 or 4 names. Cleveland was one of them. Well, Cleveland got the job because he took me down there and he wanted to build this. We had to get material off the roof. So we built this huge platform, 80 by 80, that was about 50 feet high, and
wow.
40 feet high, I'm sorry. And they wanted to drive these jitneys and pull the carts out with the scrap on them and then pick the scrap off with the crane, because we couldn't put it down through the building. And because of that, and the fact that this was the first time General Motors had done a paint kitchen out back, built in ahead of time, instead of taking the paint shops out and the ovens out one at a time, they built the whole paint shop and then connected the conveyors to the paint shop, making a real fast turnaround, and also building a paint shop, a hundreds of $1 million worth of paint shop on straight time wages and no rush, because it's being built independently. I got famous on that job, and wow. Cleveland hired me. They hired me away, and that was the start of my demolition. I started as a general superintendent, scheduling work and telling people where to go, and which I still do.
Right, it never ends. That's amazing. Okay, so what is kind of your normal scope of work? What do you guys like doing? What's the breakdown of commercial versus residential? Any of that stuff?
I was primarily critical path projects, high labor, and until the shears came into play, I had hundreds of guys on my Rolodex that I could call from all over the country, from unions all over the country, and move them into areas, whereas other people couldn't do that because they didn't have the connections. So when I left Cleveland, I was with Cleveland for about 15, 17 years. I built up a pretty good base with them, and I was leaving, and General Motors found out about it and had me come in and said, we're about to make an announcement. They made me sign a confidentiality agreement. It was only 3 paragraphs, something like what we're going to say. The meeting today is for General Motors benefit only. You're not to tell anybody anything about it. And if you do, we get your firstborn. I signed it.
Wow. Yeah.
That was 1979. And when I walked into the meeting, I was kind of dumbfounded because General Motors Assembly Division had just taken over all the individual, the Oldsmobile, the Buick, the Chevy plants. And when I walked in, the director of works engineering was there, and the director of purchasing for GMAD was there, and the controller was there. And I went, whoa. Fortunately, there were 3 facilities engineers that I had worked for over the years. And they said, we understand you're leaving the industry. And I said, right. And they said, we don't think that's a good move for us. That's why you're here. We think that you would be of great assistance to us, helping us. We're about to spend $80 billion between 1990 and 1980 and 1990.
Wow.
If you stayed with Cleveland Wrecking, you couldn't do all the work that we have to do. But if you help us manage the work, we can get a lot of work done. You know the people, you can work through our purchasing people and make the specs up, make the drawings up, and we can bid through our purchasing, and you can project manage. I said, all right. And they offered me one plant, which the plant engineer was basically famous for not accepting outside ideas. I turned that one down. They gave me 3 plants to start, and then I started U.S. dismantlement. And with all of the specialized burners that I had at one point in time, I did a job in Doraville, Georgia for GM.
Okay. I know Doraville very well. I used to live right down the street from there. I know the plant.
In 1980, there was a change. There was a plant that a demo job that I wrote the specs for.
Wow. Yeah, that's so crazy. Like, I grew up there. Huh. Wow. Oh my gosh. That's amazing. That is cool. How crazy is that? Small world.
3 years later, they wanted to do another job, and they wanted me to do it again. And I said, no, I'm not going to write the specs. Call Cleveland Ricken, call another demo contractor. I said, I have to do the work now. And they said, you can't bid it. You can't make the specs up and then bid the jobs. I said, well, then call somebody else.
Right.
A week later, they called me and they said, all right, we made a special arrangement for you, but you have to bid 24 hours before everybody else. I said, I don't have a problem doing that. And we set the bids up. I did another bid package, and it was done under Marsh Knudsen. It went out under them, and there was a big wine judging contest that year. The other demo contractors were whining, U.S. dismantlement has an unfair advantage because we made the specs up and we're bidding the job. And they had to pass right down a trailer to go bid the job. We got that job today is a $50 million job.
Wow.
I had over 300 men on that job, men and women.
That's incredible.
And of the 240 or 260, let's say 250 of them were all travelers from other parts of the country. And what I always focused on was having the 7-day, 24-hour schedules, so I could pull people in for the overtime that they would be earning. They would leave their companies in San Francisco and Detroit, Boston, Philadelphia, and they would come to me because they made a lot of money, and I'd make them work. I would work them 13 straight, and then they had to have a day off, and then 13 straight again, and they made a lot of money.
I bet.
But we had, like I said, 250 travelers, and the locals in Atlanta provided the other 50 people, which generated probably 200 W-2s, because they just kept the revolving door. They just couldn't keep up with the guys that do this. And that was my high point. When the shears came in, I lost that edge. I could beat anybody because I had that Rolodex. As a matter of fact, the FBI came into my office once when I did a job in Ford in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and they wanted to know who I paid off, because no one has ever brought in 170 people under the Ford plant from outside of New Jersey to do a job. And I picked up my punched my speakerphone, called my CFO downstairs. He knew who was in the office. And I said, Mike, how much did we pay last year to the laborers and fringes and benefits and such? He goes, oh, Mike, I'm going to make it easy. Was it over $1 million? He says, oh, yeah. I said, was it over $2 million? He says, oh, yeah. I said, was it over $3 million? He says, well, that's it. Goodbye. And I turned to the two agents and I said, when somebody pays the laborers union $3 million, I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. No, we're allowed to have fun. It's unedited.
Yeah,
That's totally fine.
I shouldn't use language like when somebody pays $3 million in fringe benefits and to the laborers union, I get portability.
Oh yeah.
And they left.
Wow. Never to be heard from again?
Never to be heard from again.
Amazing. Yeah, so what do you think, what are the characters that make someone as good as you are in the business? You know, you're just hard at doing, you work, desperation. Okay. Interesting. Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, look at me. I'm only 26 years old.
I could tell. I was thinking 25, but
I mean, I'm pretty beat up, man. I had a conversation with a very dear friend of mine out in California. We're sitting in the a company called AECOM, huge $20 billion company, had bought Cleveland Wrecking. And they hired me to shut them down, which is irony of ironies.
That is super ironic.
We're sitting in the office in Covina, California, and I had recommended a specific law firm that the in-house counsel should have hired. And I said, I want you to hire them. I'm going to recommend that you hire them. And she says, do tell why. And I said, well, these guys, Ron Tudor bought Perini in Vegas on that city center job that went very bad.
Yeah.
These attorneys made him write a check for $1 billion. And this was the people that they were trying to make Cleveland do a job. And I said, no. We're not going to do that job without a change order.
Okay.
So I'm sitting in the office with my buddy, and the president of Cleveland had to take a phone call. And my buddy looked at me, he says, what's that shit-eating grin on your face? And I was in a trance. And he says, well, are you going to share or what? And I looked at him and I said, John, how many times have we sat in an office like this and worried that we would have a company left on the lawsuit or even a home to live in? I mean, yeah, John, this is a milestone and a half. we're sitting here and we're just like the lawyers. We're going to get paid whether they win or lose. It's awesome. My third iteration in this industry is just absolutely the best.
Good.
I got a call from Whiting Turner in Washington, D.C., and they were all at Twitter because a piece of concrete had gone and flown into the street and hit a car. Nobody got hurt, but the owner had sent him an email saying, until Demo Dan's report is on my desk, you are to shut down. And they wanted me to fly down the next day, and this is on a Thursday, and I said, no, I'm not flying down. First of all, you guys keep asking me questions about protection. I want to know, what is the crane that's doing this job? You're balling down a 16-story building. I want to know what the crane is. But even more importantly, I want to know who's sitting in the seat of that crane and what his credentials are. So sure. I'm not going to come down there tomorrow. I'm going to drive down. I might stop in Youngstown and pick up my structural engineer. But I'll show up at 8 o'clock Monday morning, and I want to take that crane operator behind the crane, and we're going to have a conversation, and I want to know what's going on. And I don't want any management around. I don't want any of your management around. I just want a one-on-one with he and I. I went down there at 8 o'clock. I come in. There's management all over the crane. There's management all over the trailer. And I'm pissed. So I started walking toward the trailer, and I hear, hey, Dan, I haven't seen you since Philly. I turned around. It was a crane operator who used to work for me for 15 years.
Oh, my gosh. That's crazy.
And that's happened 3 or 4 times now. I mean, not that very same, but there's been people that I was supposed to, what do they call it, qualify or something like that. Like the Department of Energy had me certify a high reach operator out of Detroit. And the same thing happened. He had worked for me. And when he went through his list of who he worked for, he stopped. And I said, is that all? He goes, and he looked at me and kind of grinned. He goes, you don't remember me, do you? I said, oh my God. Oh my God. He worked for me in my Michigan branch.
Wow.
So these are the kind of things.
Small world.
When I left the operator and I went over, and I mean, the operator and I understood exactly what happened, and why they hadn't shut that street down, I don't know. I still don't know. I go over there and I'm about to rip the general contractor a new ass because they should have shut the street. And they didn't let me even get a word out because the representative has flown in last night and he wants to meet and wants to hear what your recommendations are. And I looked at him and I said, when are you people going to get some demolition knowledge and experience before you bid these jobs, and at least before you do them? This would have never happened had you had anybody with demolition experience as a third party, not the demo contractor telling you what he wants to do or has to do because this is the way it should be done. Someone that has your interest at heart, that understands the demolition business. That's what is missing. About 2 weeks later, and then we had a chat. 2 weeks later, I get a call from a guy, and he tells me, I'm Joe Smith. Yeah, okay. I understand you chewed out my site rep pretty good. I said, what site rep would that be? I chewed out a couple of them. And he goes, Washington, D.C. I said, oh, yeah. I said, what company are you with? He said, Amazon Development. I said, oh, okay. He says, we know we have a risk on a job here in Washington State. We're moving 37,000 jobs out of Seattle because they put a head tax on, and we're building a 40-story tower and a 30-story tower in downtown Bellevue, Washington. We know we have a risk here. We got a building that we want to take down. Can you fly out here next week, or can you come out? And I said, I can come out 10 days. So I went out and I took a look at this building. And first of all, the 40-story tower is already 90 feet in the hole. They're working on the foundations. And the the 30-story area, this is a complete block. They buy a block at a time.
Okay.
And the 30-story tower site had the old Hewlett Packard building on it, 10 stories, 125 feet tall, 10 feet from the 90-foot deep hole. And
Oh my gosh.
they wanted to work in the hole continuously while they took down the 10-story. At first, it shocked me to see that close. And then I said to them, at first I was kind of taken back by the closeness, but then I started thinking, wait a minute, it's how you do this job. I've done jobs in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, 20, 30-story buildings. People were walking under my scaffolding. It can be done, but it's got to be done right. And I know all of these demo guys are going to want to use the high reach machine. And I refuse to be involved in this job if you don't listen to me and let somebody put a crushing tool at the end of 100 and some feet thick, crushing a beam that is less than 10 feet away from a 90-foot deep hole where men are working. Not going to do it. If you had a piece of concrete the size of a quarter fly into that hole and hit somebody on the hard hat, make a noise, God forbid something worse, you're going to have a complete stand down of both of these projects, and the cost is going to be way more than any kind of additional effort we make on this job, because by the time the unions get done with you, the safety people get done with you, you are going to have, they're going to take this building down with spoons.
Yeah, sure. Do one thing at a time, guys. Don't get so crazy.
The general contractor believed in me. The owner believed in me. And I told him I wanted to take it down 2 bays down, all the way to the slab, all the way around the building. And the other exposure was the downtown Bellevue Transportation Center, where these stretch buses came in, 5 on each side, the whole block long. They had this beautiful weather protection over the island made of glass.
Oh no.
45 feet from the building.
Crazy. Crazy.
Amazon hung 2 cameras on the buildings, giving me a 180 view of that site. And I sat here in my basement, 42 miles north of Chicago, with one of my monitors trained on that job. And I would pick up the phone and I would call the superintendent for the general and say, go up there and ask them what they're going to do with that beam on that corner. I want to know. It was better than being on site. Unbelievable.
Wow. That's amazing.
And we got through the job without a first aid.
Incredible. So you had some good people there, and then with your wisdom, things went smooth. That's nice.
Well,
amazing.
The 2 areas that I've had more pleasure in doing was that job, a couple of other consulting jobs where I've done the specs and such. I mean, the General Motors thing was a wonderful experience. And I've been the demolition consultant for 25 years down at Oak Ridge, where everything glows in the dark, for all that demolition work down there.
Amazing.
For the Department of Energy.
That is cool. Yeah, we were talking to someone the other day about nuclear sites getting taken down. And I was just like, that's great. I mean, to you, that's probably a walk in the park, but to me, I was just
not
shocked.
That's exactly when you get into trouble, when you think you're walking through the park.
Yeah. Well, that's why you're so valuable, right? Is you're used to it, maybe is the better expression to say. You're used to it. It's something in your repertoire. However, you know the risks and you treat it, with that in mind.
Sometimes I introduce myself as Murphy's agent.
I love that. And For anyone who hasn't seen it, in his background, he has the Murphy's Law, which is pretty amazing. Would you say maybe what are a few things that get demolition companies so in trouble? They bite off more than they can chew. It's their first time doing an implosion, so they're
I'm going
kind of
back to
experimenting.
what did I tell you earlier? That is what I have found. Arrogant overconfidence.
Okay.
Arrogant overconfidence. I had it back in the 70s. I was doing a paint shop, General Motors paint shop in Willow Run, Michigan. And before we cut the paint shop, we would flush the lines with a chemical, which you can't use anymore. But we would flush the lines with the chemical to get them clean, so that we could take a torch and cut the old paint lines. Otherwise,
Okay.
I remember when Cleveland did that job in Wilmington, it was my indoctrination by fire. You would take a torch and cut one of those paint lines, and you'd blow 20 feet of flame out the end of the pipe. It was insane. Anyway, we were purging. We came up with purging these lines so that you could take a torch to them and cut it just like any other steel. I couldn't get a clean line, and we were purging for 2 days. So I finally went up to plant engineering, and I told the plant engineer, Joe Orloff, I said, Joe, I can't get a clean line. He says, you do know it's a 3-pipe system. I said, what? What's a 3-pipe system? I've never seen one. He says, you haven't seen one because we're the only ones that have one. I said, oh. Great. So there was a pipe that was loaded with thinner. And if I had cut those lines, there would have been an inferno that burned the plant down.
Wow.
I had one local foreman that was just pissed off at me because I was laying off 65 people that night because we couldn't go forward. I ran out of work because I couldn't get the lines purged. And I went in and told my timekeeper I need 65 layoff checks in the next couple hours, at which point he almost threw up. This foreman was screaming at me, "Oh, I've been doing this crap since you were in diapers. Give me that torch. I'll go in there." I said, "No, you won't."
Yeah, please don't. Don't do that.
Would not let him. As a matter of fact, I wasn't going to lay you off. Now I'm going to lay you off because I don't want you anywhere near here with a torch. I laid him off. A week later, we had it cleared, and we got it done. 2 weeks later, I find out that this same guy that was telling me he was doing this work when I was in diapers killed himself on a demolition job. He cut some bar joists and he went down with the roof. Arrogant overconfidence is the biggest problem, from the supervision to the management to everyone. If you don't believe in Murphy, get the hell out of the demolition business. Because if you don't plan for it, it will happen, and it will happen at the worst time.
That's amazing. Okay, so more or less the vision is it's okay to be confident and maybe competent is the better word. Hey, I've been there, done that. However, use your wisdom in everything that you're doing, because I can't tell you how many podcasts we've had, especially recently, where we've had passing away stories effectively on job sites.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay. Yeah, because I do imagine, let's say someone who's done this for 30, 40 years, they got to feel, hey, this is just another day in the life. But you're saying too much of that is where real problems happen. So how can we make this really applicable to companies that are listening? Because we have some of the demo companies are making $5 million a year. Some are making $100 million. Some are making $50 million that are listening to us every single year. The ones on the higher end of that spectrum, would you say they have a higher propensity to get that mindset, or would you say it's the lower level ones that have that mindset that you've seen?
I had a very interesting conversation with, I'll give you this in 2 steps.
Okay.
I'm doing a job out in Oklahoma City at the GM plant. The guy that got the job recognized right away that he didn't. He might have bitten off more than he could chew. So he got me involved, and I brought my people, and I helped them do a joint venture kind of thing. And during the course of the job, there were some accidents, not with us, but with the other trades. And Detroit got pissed off at the plant. And Detroit told them, you have one more accident, and we're shutting down the job, the project, and that plant. One more accident. So the general contractor, which I think was the Washington Group at the time, and GM made a stand down of the project, and all management had to meet in the cafeteria for this big conversation that they were going to have. And I don't know that they invented it, but it was definitely in the embryonic stages of a safety task analysis. That process was incubated there. When I came back with my safety guy walking back to the trailer, Billy says to me, how the hell are we going to do this? And I said, Billy, I don't know. But you know what? If we can do this, this will give us a competitive edge, number one. And we can name our price with people that know about this.
Sure.
Years later, I was doing a job in Eddystone, Pennsylvania at the Kimberly-Clark paper mill. And that job, my safety guy came down, same guy, Billy, came down to the trailer. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. And he says, Bobby won't tie off up there. I said, well, let's go on up there. It took us about an hour and a half to figure out how they could tie off, because otherwise it was tying them off really impeded their movements and everything else. It took us an hour and a half, but we finally figured out how to do it. And we walked, and I'm walking back to the trailer, and I say, remember that conversation we had out in Oklahoma? He says, yeah, I was thinking about it the whole time we're working on it. And it was about 2 or 3 days later that I had a conversation with him. I'm not going to mention his name because everybody they know him. He says, we had this conversation about the safety management and the safety practices. And he said, well, these little guys can't afford to do that. I said, it's not a case of the little guy not being able to do it. You can't afford not to do it. You are not going to have a company.
Absolutely.
So you really, you have to get a mindset that Murphy's going to get you if you don't give him the respect. It's going to happen, and you have to. If you plan on something going wrong, it will not go wrong. It's almost guaranteed.
Okay.
But if you don't plan, I can guarantee you it will go wrong.
Yeah, interesting. I like that. Okay.
You have to be
day in, day out, you're seeing this.
You have to take an aggressive position in pick up every piece of board, look underneath everything to find out where the surprises are coming from, because what board you don't pick up, that's where the surprise is coming from.
Right. Our best guests that come on say they have companies, either they're the owners or they're the team members, that they have a company culture of safety and proactivity. Would you say that that's very much in alignment with your ideals?
It's got to be. The only thing I would add to that is aggressive.
Okay. That makes sense.
Aggressive, proactive. You can be proactive in thought. And people make up these beautiful safety manuals, and then they don't listen to themselves.
Right. That's fair. Yeah. Interesting. Well, we got a few more minutes here. If you do, I would love to hear kind of some of the wisdom that you were sharing before the podcast and our pre-interview with the audience, and then we'll close out. So yeah, please have the floor and let us know in the next few minutes any of the wisdom that you want to share with our audience.
I've been on the. I was a publicity chairman back when I had hair.
Yesterday, was it?
NDA, when we came up with the 10 misconceptions of the demolition industry. I have been on the education committee ever since, and I'm still on it. I don't attend the conferences normally. This year I'm going to go out because it's the 50-year anniversary, and I got it.
San Francisco? San Antonio. What am I saying?
San Antonio, right?
Amazing.
I'm going to be there with a bunch of old guys that I called and told them we got to go out. So I'm going to go out there this year. I've tried to get the NDA to put some money into enlightening the GBCAs and the purchasing agencies that buy demolition and the regulators, because they are the people that just don't get it. I had I was hired by OSHA on that Salvation Army collapse in Philadelphia that killed those 7 people, and that is a perfect example of an owner just blinded by low price. They hired a guy that had experience of 2 row home burnout cleanouts, and he was taking down a 4-story building alongside an occupied operating Salvation Army store. Do you know the story about this?
No, I don't.
They were taking it down. He pulled too many joists out, and the wall that was over this 1-story store, they all of a sudden needed to get on the roof of the Salvation Army, and the Salvation Army hired an architect because they wanted to know, what are you going to do with this wall? How are you going to protect my roof? How are you going to do this and that? And they were in those conversations when the wall fell onto the building and injured. They killed 6 people right away. The 7th died later, and there were 13 other people that were injured. So you had 20 injuries, 20 plaintiffs. The problem was the Salvation Army was a bunch of ministers. They're nice people. They don't curse. They don't tell people, what are you talking about? They kept on sending these stupid email messages from the owner. We have to get on the roof. This could be a disaster if we don't get on the roof. The ambulance chasing lawyers used that to collect $240 million from the Salvation Army. Oh my gosh. Because they didn't refute those emails. You were warned that this would be a disaster. You were warned that we don't want to be in the papers. You were warned, and you did nothing. $240 million for not doing something.
Wow.
That is what I need. The regulators. I went into the Philadelphia. I sat and talked to 35 building inspectors. They know better. They don't need me. It was so. The worst case I've ever had. I mean, OSHA was okay. Then the Salvation Army hired me after OSHA put the guys away. That is probably the worst part of my demolition career. The best part was Amazon and DOE and some of these colleges, Penn State, Washington University, some of these other people that retained me as a consultant or write the spec like GM did, put me in business.
That's amazing. Very cool.
That's what we need. We need more regulators to understand that demolition is not deconstruction. When you pick a beam off a trailer, you can put it back down, because when you find that it's overweight, you put it down the 6 inches you picked it up. That doesn't happen 200 feet in the air.
Sure. Crazy. Yeah. A lot of our guests come on and talk about the art, the science, the physics, that it's not just this one thing. You know, people, they see a building disappear and they think, they knocked it down, no big deal. There's a lot that goes into it. And that's where a guy like you comes in, because there's a lot of risky operators out there. There's a lot of overconfident, arrogant, old boys club. I know how to do it. And we just had a story about it the other day. One of them, he was in an elevator shaft, and the elevator came right down onto him and his machine. He passed away. Older guy who'd been in the business for many years. Many years. We had that story come up. Really sad. Okay, well, I think we covered quite a bit of the bases there. What would you tell the the regulators, if you had their full attention and you could say a few sentences to them, other than curse words, you could put those in too, but what would you wish to tell them if you had them fully captivated and they would actually act on what you're saying?
I don't get it. How can you issue a permit to take down a 7-Eleven, and you issue the same freaking permit to take down a refinery, and it doesn't matter who draws the permit? That's something wrong with that picture.
Absolutely.
And I tried to get Philadelphia to go into by having demolition people involved somewhere in this course, that you have different levels of permits, different qualifications. Because if you're qualified to pull an A permit or a B permit, that's good. That
makes sense. Sure. Kind of tiers.
Now, the other thing is, I've been relying on some of my specs. I ask that I want to see a pre-qualification. And I use the term better than one. Do you know who the NCCI is?
I do not know.
When we get off this call, go on Google and say, who is the NCCI? It is the National Compensation Commission, something in Florida. And they are the ones, for every hour that's worked in the demolition industry or the plastering industry or the painting industry or the roofing industry, your insurance company will send their hours of that trade to NCCI in Florida, and they collect all that information. And when the carriers want to know what is the experience, the experience record of anyone, a painter, a demo guy, a carpenter, they have this, how much was paid in damages, fatalities, injuries, versus how many hours were reported doing that work. That gives the state the ability to come up with a statute of how much the workman's comp has to be paid per $100 of payroll. And there is an EMR, and it's an experience modification rating that allows the carriers to go to a good contractor that has a 0.5, a 0.75 experience mod, and give them a 50% or a 70% discount over the statute rate. It's like a credit agency check. It would be the same way as a bank would go to the credit agency and say, what's Dan's credit rating? Is it 400 or is it 800? If you have a 0.75 EMR, you are a better contractor than the average. The average is 1. And the average is not something I won't take somebody who has a 1. Normally they only have a 1 because it's a 1.0, because there are no hours that they've reported. They're brand new. That's what you start with. Start with a 1. And all the hours, if you have no accidents, then you go down. And 3 years of history from the NCCI is I will not have anybody pre-qualified who cannot have a better than 1 or less than 1 rating.
Okay.
DMO.
Interesting. Okay. Love that. And I think, again, this will resonate a lot with our audience because if we attract the right people, I guess, frankly. And they're very congruent with, like we said, being proactive, safety oriented, aggressively so. It kind of comes through when we're on the podcast. You could tell that they're very aligned with those principles. Okay, well, I don't know if you want to maybe list your information, maybe a phone number, a website, anything like that, and who is ideal to contact you if you're taking any new clients.
You can Google, if you Google Daniel A. Hoffman III, you got to put in the A and the I at the end. Otherwise, you get a CIA station chief or a poet.
Okay. Okay. And who's ideal to reach out to you, just in case any of those people are in our audience and they need to retain you?
Say again?
Who is ideal to reach out to you if they need your services? What type of person, company?
It depends on what they want. If demo guys, I mean, I've got a couple of demo guys I've kind of fostered into growing, and one of them is really doing real well. The consulting is something that I just love to do, write the specs. In other words, if they have a client that the client and them really have a good relationship, and the client wants them to write the spec, but then they can't bid the job. They're the ones, they call me, I write the spec, I make the level playing field, I get rid of the yahoos that don't belong on the bid list, and you have a good level playing field, because I will not have anything. If I can't get to agree to only allow pre-qualified bidders. I went through this with the government. Once you send that bid package out and they respond, you can't get rid of them. And they could be the worst guys in the world, and that's usually the ones that are the low bid, because the less you know about demolition, the cheaper you can be. So pre-qualification is key, and the best pre-qualifier is the NCCI.
Yep. Love it. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan. We'll wrap up this podcast. Thank you guys for listening. Dan, you've been awesome, and we're glad we got to have you on.
Good. Okay. I hope we made some progress.
That's a wrap for this episode of Demolition Success Secrets. Stay tuned and subscribe for more explosive insights from our upcoming episodes. Until then, continue to blow up your demolition business and make the competition rubble in your path.